What is happening, everyone? It's your boy Manny, and welcome back to episode 35 of Manny's Food Channel. And for today's episode, for the first time ever on my channel, today I'm going to be making a vegetarian dish. Now, I myself personally am not a huge fan of vegetarian dishes. However, I'm a huge fan when they're made right and, more importantly, delicious. So for today's episode, I'm going to be making an Asian-inspired braised tofu that should take you no longer than 30 minutes to prepare and cook. That is not only healthy, but most importantly, absolutely delicious. So without further ado, time to get cooking. Let's do this. Okay, so there is not a lot of prep to do for this recipe. Truthfully, we only have 3 things that we need to prep, okay? The first one is we're gonna grate some garlic, which I did in the background here. The second one is I'm going to finely chop some green onions. And then the third is we're gonna slice up this extra firm tofu here. However, in the background, since I did the garlic, I'm gonna start off with the green onions, or the scallions. If you can do a big bunch at one time, definitely go for it. But what you're gonna do is you're gonna just cut off the roots here and just thinly slice them. You don't want to do it too thick, but if you do too thick, it's nothing wrong with it. So just make sure you thinly slice your green onions. So once you finish with your green onions, just set them aside. What I would do is I would set a little bit aside as well for your garnish. And you want to make sure you use the top half of the green onions, because the bottom part here, the white part, is very bitter if you eat it raw. So this one here has less of an intense flavor. You want to use the top of the green onion as you're going to do it for garnish. And what I'm going to do now is my only other prep is to prepare this tofu. Now, I bought extra firm tofu. And the reason I bought this kind here is so that it doesn't break apart and it holds its shape very well. One thing you want to make sure that you're doing is dry up your tofu. I can't stress that enough, because it's just like beef. You don't want to have added moisture, because that's going to ruin the caramelization on the tofu, just like you would any kind of meat. And you want a nice brown kind of crust going all the way around your slices. So make sure you thoroughly dry up your tofu as much as possible. And since we're not in a restaurant, or this is not a restaurant style setting, I wouldn't, sometimes people would just trim the sides here just to make it aesthetically pleasing. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to slice up the whole thing. And I'm going to slice it to around 1/4 inch. Or, to whatever size you prefer to, because we're going to be caramelizing this side here as well as the other side to add some color and ultimately the flavor. And again, what I would do later is I would pat each side down just to remove any excess moisture. So that way we can have a nice caramelization going all the way around. So just slice up your tofu. And now I'm just going to season each side with a touch of salt. Making sure that all sides are seasoned, so that way we have more intense and delicious flavor coming from the tofu. And once you're done with preparing your tofu, we're going to set it aside. And we're going to quickly move on to preparing the braising liquid for the braised tofu. And for this step here, it's very straightforward. All we're going to do is add some soy sauce, some water. Usually I like to do 2 parts water to 1 part soy sauce, because soy sauce has a lot of sodium naturally. So we're not going to put any salt in here. I'm going to add some sugar to kind of cut down and even out the saltiness. Add some garlic, that grated garlic we did, and Korean chili powder, which is Gochugaru. If you do not have that at home, my go-to substitute is always cayenne pepper. It is in some way, shape, or form similar to the flavor of Gochugaru spice. And now we're going to give this a really good mix and set it aside. Let those flavors kind of meld and connect with one another. And now we're going to move on to searing off the tofu and adding that nice golden crust and caramelization on the tofu. Alright, so just like you are adding that mired effect or that nice crust on the searing of your beef or any meat, you want to make sure you use the exact same method to do the tofu as well. So, as I mentioned earlier, we pat this dry to make sure there's no moisture that could possibly ruin that nice golden crust that we're trying to build on the outside. Number 2, you want to make sure your pot or your pan is hot enough. And this one here is medium to high heat. Usually when you put your hand pretty close, you should be able to feel that heat emitting from the bottom of the pot. 3, I use canola oil. Canola oil is a neutral kind of oil, and it doesn't kind of ruin the flavor as well as burn when it's on high heat. So first, you want to make sure that your oil is heated up very well as your pan. And next up, test a piece of tofu, okay? Don't start putting your tofu in there, because if it's not hot enough, it's gonna stick to the bottom of the pot, and you don't want that. You wanna keep that nice shape for your tofu. So just test one. If you hear it start sizzling, then it's ready to go. So in that case, you can hear that it's ready. So I'm gonna put all the tofu in here. Like we do beef or any other meat, you don't want to crowd your pot. You wanna make sure there is some space in there. And put them one side down in order to start building that Maillard effect and a nice crust on the tofu. Squeeze down on the tofu if you have to make sure the whole surface is stuck to the bottom of the pan. And each side, I would say it takes around 3 to 4 minutes until you have that nice golden crust. Now, when you're trying to build that nice golden crust on your tofu, you don't want to be constantly moving it, otherwise it kind of ruins that Maillard effect that we're looking for. And also, unfortunately, I don't know where I put my small offset spatula, so I'm going to use the big one here. Try and have a very flexible one so that way you can go underneath the tofu to kind of flip it over if you're not comfortable using a spoon or a fork or a knife or what utensil that you're going to use with. So try and use preferably that small offset spatula to kind of flip it over. And one way to know whether or not that side of the tofu is cooked to the right crust effect that we're looking for, you should be able to move it naturally from the original spot that it was staying at. So if it's not moving, then it's not ready yet. You don't want to remove it, otherwise some parts of the tofu will stick to the pot and it's kind of going to destroy that look and aesthetic plating that we're looking for. So at this point here, I just separated the tofu from the pot. I feel that I need a little bit more oil, so I'm going to add just a touch, not too much. And then I'm going to flip each side of the tofu over. And you can see it's got that really nice golden crust that we were looking for. Alright, let's have a look and see if the other side is ready. Yeah, so it looks like the other side is ready. It's got a nice golden crust on both sides, so it's going to add a nice flavor and texture to our dish. Now I'm going to remove it from the pot here. Put it on a plate with a piece of paper towel so that way it absorbs some of that oil. And what's extremely important is if you feel that your pot has enough oil, do not add any more excess oil. And now we're going to add in the green onions and just saute them for a couple of minutes to remove some of that bitterness. Once you've sauteed the scallions or the green onions for a couple of minutes to kind of remove some of that rawness from the green onions, now we're going to add in our sauce or our braising liquid. And just be careful, we are adding liquid to a hot pan. It might splash back, so just be careful as you're pouring it. And what we want to do is reduce this just a touch before we add the tofu back into the pot or the pan. So it might take around 3 to 5 minutes, just depending on how much you reduce. But now we're going to add it in here. And we want it to thicken up just a touch. So I'll probably reduce this for around 5 minutes on medium to low heat. And then once that's ready, then we're gonna add the tofu back in. So once it's been reducing for about 3 to 5 minutes, now I'm gonna put the tofu in, okay? And I'm probably gonna braise each side for around 15 to 20 minutes to really absorb all that delicious flavor from the braising liquid. Now you notice here that my heat is a little bit high. Turn it down. You want it on medium to low heat. I am not gonna cover it with a lid because I want the braising liquid to kind of thicken up a little bit and evaporate some of that liquid as well. So make sure you don't put a lid on there. And like I said, I'm probably going to do it from my side here, maybe 15 or 20 minutes on each side to braise each side and absorb all that delicious flavor from the liquid. And then after that, I'm going to flip it on the other side. And then we're going to continue to finish off this braised tofu, and then we can start plating. Alright, now our final step is, once it's finished, to add just a touch of sesame oil, okay? Now you want to remember, sesame oil, extremely powerful, potent, strong in flavor. You don't want to add too much. And we're just going to use this to finish off the sauce and kind of glaze the tofu with it. And once you've done that, we're ready to start plating. Now I kind of put together ingredients in this dish based off past experiences of different flavor profiles that I've used to create different flavors. Now for this one here, you can always change the ingredients, as I mentioned always. If you don't have the Gochugaru, you can certainly use some cayenne pepper. If you want to add some meat in there, you can certainly do that as well. It would make this a very umami and beefy kind of dish. You can make kimchi fried rice, you can make garlic fried rice, whatever you want to do to kind of jazz it up and make it your own and put your own stamp on it, you can definitely do that. So, as customary, and as always, I'm always hungry, which never changes, but time to have the taste test. Cheers. It's very delicious. You got a touch of sweetness in there that came from the sugar. Not too salty because we balanced it out with that water that we added in the beginning. If we didn't add that water there, it would be a lot more on the saltier side than expected. And we got that hint of chili in the back of my palate here, which is just balanced out as the overall dish, and it's absolutely delicious. So definitely have a try. Let me know how it is. And if you enjoyed this video, please give my video a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel. I look forward to seeing you all next week, and have a wonderful week ahead.